There is a moment in every war when the world stops and recalibrates, when the assumptions that powerful nations built entire defense strategies on are suddenly exposed as hollow, when a country dismissed, humiliated, and chronically underestimated walks into a room full of the most sophisticated militaries on earth and quietly says, "We know how to do this, and you don't." That moment happened in March 2026, not in a war room in Washington, not in an Israeli operations center, not in a Riyadh palace negotiating arms transfers worth billions. It happened in Kyiv, and the man delivering the message was a president whom the leader of the free world had publicly told, on camera, that he didn't have the cards. It turned out he had the only card that mattered. To understand the full weight of what Ukraine did, you have to trace the origins of the weapon at the center of everything. The Shahed 136 is an Iranian-designed loitering munition, what the media loosely calls a kamikaze drone. It has a delta wing, a pusher propeller mounted at its tail, and an explosive warhead in its nose. It flies at roughly 185 kilometers per hour, low to the ground, often at night, in swarms designed to overwhelm radar systems and exhaust interceptor stockpiles. Its range stretches beyond 2,000 kilometers, and it costs, depending on the model and the source, somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 per unit. That price is the point. It is not designed to win in a single strike. It is designed to bankrupt the defense. When your enemy spends $3 to $13 million destroying each one, and you can manufacture thousands of them a month, the math becomes a weapon in itself. Iran began supplying these drones to Russia in the summer of 2022, months after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. Within weeks, the night skies over Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa, and Mykolaiv were filled with that distinctive propeller whine, a sound Ukrainian civilians came to associate with imminent destruction. Russia launched the first wave in October 2022, targeting energy infrastructure across Ukraine with precision and brutality. Substations went dark. Millions lost power in winter temperatures that dropped below -20. Hospitals switched to generators, and the world watched and wondered how long Ukraine could hold. What the world did not fully see was what was quietly happening inside Ukraine's defense institutions, a methodical, desperate, brilliantly improvised revolution in how to fight a drone war. The conventional response to drone swarms, the one that wealthy Western militaries defaulted to, was to fire expensive interceptor missiles at them. A Patriot round costs $3 to $4 million. An Aster 30, used by several European nations, costs a comparable amount. The exchange rate was catastrophic. Every interceptor fired at a $20,000 Shahed was a net financial victory for the attacker. Ukraine's military understood this from the first week of the drone campaign. They could not afford to fight that way, and so they didn't. Ukrainian engineers, military units, and private companies began developing something that had never been systematically deployed at scale in modern warfare: the dedicated interceptor drone, a small, fast, cylindrical, unmanned aircraft built for one purpose: to find an incoming Shahed in the air and destroy it on contact. The cost: between $800 and $3,000 per unit. The math had just flipped. By the end of 2025, more than 10 Ukrainian defense companies were manufacturing interceptor drones in volume. The Wild Hornets Group, among others, developed variants equipped with computer vision capable of autonomous targeting, hunting drones without a human operator in the loop during the final seconds of intercept. General Cherry produced a high-speed variant specifically optimized for the Shahed's flight profile. The Ukrainian military built layered detection networks around these systems, acoustic sensors that could identify the characteristic sound signature of an incoming Shahed flying below radar coverage, linked to digital targeting systems that cued interceptor operators in real time. In the skies over Kyiv, Ukrainian interceptor drones were accounting for the majority of Shahed kills. Over the entire country, they were eliminating hundreds of incoming drones per week. Russia had fired nearly 60,000 Shahed variants at Ukraine across 4 years of full-scale war. Ukraine had answered every single one of them, and in doing so, it had built the deepest operational knowledge base in the world on how to defeat this specific weapon at scale. No military college had this curriculum. No Pentagon simulation had run these variables at this volume. Only Ukraine had lived it, day after day, city after city, winter after winter. Then came February 28, 2026. The United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated strike campaign against Iranian military infrastructure unprecedented in scale since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Within hours, Tehran activated everything it had. Ballistic missiles flew toward American bases in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Jordan. Oil infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates was struck. But the primary instrument of Iran's retaliation, and the weapon it launched in the greatest numbers, the weapon that caused the most diffuse, sustained, psychologically exhausting damage, was the Shahed. Gulf state data confirmed it within the first 2 weeks. Iran was launching roughly 3 drones for every 1 ballistic missile. The ratio made strategic sense. The drones were cheaper to build, harder to detect on conventional radar at low altitude, and devastatingly effective at burning through the missile stocks of Patriot and THAAD batteries that had taken years to accumulate. A single Patriot interceptor costs $13.5 million. Iran had tens of thousands of drones in its inventory. The Gulf states, among the wealthiest nations on Earth, with some of the most sophisticated American-made air defense systems money could buy, discovered in real time what Ukraine had discovered 3 years earlier, that this was a math problem more than a military one, and they were on the wrong side of the equation. The phone calls that followed were not made to Washington, they were made to Kyiv, and Kyiv answered. By March 8th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky publicly confirmed that the first teams had been dispatched. By March 17th, standing before the British Parliament in London, he announced that 201 Ukrainian counter-drone specialists were already deployed in the region, with an additional 34 on standby for immediate activation. 2 days later, Rustem Umerov, head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, confirmed the operational picture in explicit terms. Ukrainian military specialists were actively operating in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and Jordan. Interception units had been deployed to protect civilian and critical infrastructure, and work was already underway to expand coverage areas. Ukrainian teams had also been specifically dispatched to the Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, a facility hosting significant numbers of American military personnel, at direct request. I believe no one has experience comparable to ours, Zelensky told journalists. Ukrainians have been fighting against Shahed drones for years now. Everyone recognizes that no other country in the world has this kind of experience. But this is where the story becomes truly extraordinary, because this moment did not arrive without warning. 7 months earlier, in August 2025, Ukrainian officials had sat down with senior American administration figures and presented a detailed proposal. The briefing included a map of the Middle East, a risk assessment of Iran's growing drone capacity, and a concrete proposal: let Ukraine establish drone combat hubs in Turkey, Jordan, and the Gulf states. Position Ukrainian interceptor technology and trained operators there now before a conflict erupted while the window for deliberate preparation still existed. The Trump administration declined. The Ukrainians went home without an agreement and without a dollar. 7 months later, Iranian drones were killing American service members in Kuwait, burning through interceptor stockpiles that would take years to replace, and senior U.S. officials were privately acknowledging that the counter-drone response in the Gulf had been, in their own characterization, disappointing. One American official told journalists directly, Ukrainian drones deployed earlier would have saved lives. It was the kind of admission that does not come easily, and it came too late. The geopolitical dimensions of this reversal extend in every direction. Consider the origin of the weapon causing the crisis. Iran designed the Shahed and supplied it to Russia beginning in August 2022. Russia fired it at Ukraine nearly 60,000 times. Ukraine's engineers, soldiers, and defense companies studied every one of those attacks, failed against many of them, learned from each failure, and built a layered response system that was ultimately more cost-effective than anything any NATO member had developed from theory alone. Then Iran turned that same weapon on the Gulf, and Ukraine deployed that hard-won expertise to defend American allies from the weapon Iran had originally exported to destroy Ukraine. Tehran had, through the pure logic of its own foreign policy, funded the development of its own countermeasure. The circular irony is almost too precise to be accidental, and yet it is entirely the product of cause and effect. Russia's role in this chain deserves particular scrutiny. Moscow had not simply used Iran's drones, it had received them, reverse-engineered them, improved upon them, and shared production knowledge back to Tehran through what Zelensky publicly described as a relationship of brothers in hatred. Russian intelligence was providing targeting data to Iranian operators striking American assets in the Gulf. Russian upgraded Shahed variants, designated the Garan 3, flew faster and incorporated radio beacon navigation enhancements that made them harder to jam. Ukraine had been dealing with these improvements for months before the Gulf states encountered them. That accumulated experience, not theoretical analysis but operational encounter data, was precisely what Ukrainian specialists were bringing to the Emirates and Qatar. They had already seen the upgraded variants. They had already built intercept protocols around them. The Gulf states were starting from zero. Ukraine was walking in with a 4-year graduate course already completed. The strategic implications for NATO and European security are impossible to overstate. The alliance has spent decades and trillions of dollars building layered missile defense architectures designed around the threat of high-end ballistic missiles and supersonic cruise weapons. What the Iran conflict demonstrated, and what Ukraine proved across 4 years before the world was paying attention, is that the most operationally disruptive threat in the contemporary battle space is not the expensive weapon. It is the cheap, mass-produced, swarming drone that forces defenders to make impossible choices about which interceptors to expend on which targets. Europe has not solved this problem. NATO has not solved this problem at scale. The United States, for all its technological supremacy, arrived in the Gulf crisis without a battlefield-proven, cost-competitive counter-swarm doctrine already deployed and operational. Ukraine had one. The lesson for European defense ministries is unambiguous. The gap between high-end deterrence and mass production asymmetric drone defense is real, it is dangerous, and the only country that has closed it through actual combat is the one currently asking for Patriots and ATACMS in return for its expertise. The final dimension of this story is the one that may matter most over the years ahead. Ukraine entered March 2026 as a country that the leader of the world's most powerful nation had humiliated in front of cameras, told it had nothing to offer, that it had no leverage, that it should accept the terms of whoever held the stronger hand. Within weeks, 228 Ukrainian specialists were operating across 5 Middle Eastern countries. More were on standby. 11 nations had formally requested Ukraine's assistance, including the United States itself. And the Pentagon was in active talks to procure Ukrainian-made interceptor drones for its own Gulf operations. Zelensky had transformed 4 years of suffering into the most consequential form of strategic currency available in the modern world. Irreplaceable, battle-tested operational knowledge that no amount of money could manufacture overnight. He had offered it as a trade. Expertise for air defense missiles, cooperation for leverage in securing a ceasefire, partnership for partnership. The country that was told it didn't have the cards had turned out to hold the entire deck, and the world, watching Iranian drones fall from the skies over Riyadh and Abu Dhabi at the hands of Ukrainian operators using Ukrainian technology built in Ukrainian factories, understood something fundamental about the nature of power in the 21st century. It does not always belong to the largest army or the wealthiest treasury. Sometimes it belongs to the nation that has already paid the price to learn what everyone else is only beginning to understand.